Blair Brainard. I served in Afghanistan in the city of Herat from 1965 to 1968. Spent 2 years as an English teacher and 1 year working in the government branch tourist office of Herat.
I'm Madeline Brainard. I was in Herat, Afghanistan from 1966 to 1968. I was a nurse.
Great. All set? Mm-hmm. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Don Sauer. I served in Afghanistan from 1967 through 68. I served in the Logar province. Barak was the provincial capital, and that's where I was stationed. I was working as an agricultural volunteer, trying to help improve wheat production. It was the time of the Green Revolution, when wheat varieties were developed in the Rockefeller Center in Mexico, and they were AID was trying to propagate them in places like Afghanistan to increase wheat production. There were problems.
Tell us a story about a problem.
Well, the problem that I saw most commonly was that these were developed at high altitudes in Mexico. They had different pests, they had different nutrient needs, the soil was different. They weren't adapted to circumstances in Afghanistan. The Afghan farmers had been farming this land for 5,000 years. And we were a little bit hubristic to think that we were going to come into the country and show them how to overnight increase wheat production. It wasn't terrible. The people were very good to us, but I'm not sure we did a great deal of good in that regard. I've always said that the most tangible and positive thing that I did while I was there was build a fence. I actually knew how to build a fence. Having worked on farms in Kansas, I knew how to build a fence. So I helped and supervised building a fence. It was a good fence. But I don't know that we did that much to improve wheat production.
Jackie Davidson, Afghanistan, 1968 into 69. Tell a little story about what happened while you were there. We were with the smallpox project to eradicate smallpox in the villages. We've since made a beautiful film called Once in Afghanistan that tells all of our stories, the entire women group who was over there. It's a wonderful film if you have a chance to get it, and a funny story. You know, it was a beautiful country. There were many funny stories. Our hearts break right now for how it is. And I thank Peace Corps folks for putting this all together and maybe giving a little highlight for future volunteers. Someday maybe they can go back. Thank you.
Stephanie Smock, Sebha, Libya, 68 to 69. Hazarajuf, Afghanistan, 1970. Then Kabul, Afghanistan, 71, 72.
I'm L Padolski. I served in Afghanistan in 70-71, and I was stationed in Kabul in an outlying area called Kaloy Fatullah Khan as teaching English as a second language, Tesla. And a few good stories, but I think one of my favorites is when I flew to Bamyan Valley where the two giant Buddhas were located. And the whole trip was kind of an adventure in itself. The plane was a Canadian twin-jet Otter, a little plane, 11 passengers. And the story goes, the airline, Afghan Airlines, was owned 49% by Pan Am, so Pan Am had a major controlling interest in the airline. Supposedly they offered an American pilot $200,000 a year to make these domestic runs from Kabul to a couple of other cities back and forth in Afghanistan, and it was so dangerous the American pilot said no. They offered a Canadian pilot $100,000 American to do it. He turned it down. They got an Afghan pilot for $50,000 a year, and for an Afghan, $50,000 a year was like, even in those days, like one of us making $500,000 a year. I mean, you live like a king. In any event, when we took off, the plane was loaded, 11 passengers, and as we're flying toward central Afghanistan, where Bamyan Valley is, you can look out on either side of the aircraft, and there were 2 mountain peaks, and the wings were no more, not even a foot between the wings and the mountain peaks on either side. And we immediately got down in a prayer formation. We got there and we landed, and the runway was like, if you look at one of those old 1930s movies where the plane lands on a dirt runway and bounces along, that was it. I mean, there was no control tower, just a little radio shack. And Bamyan itself was a fantastically beautiful place. It was pristine. There was no pollution. There were very few vehicles in there. Electricity, they had a generator that worked only a few hours a day. And so it was absolutely beautiful, beautiful place. At night, you could sit outside and look at the sky, and you've never seen the sky as magnificent. And Bamyan was probably 10 or 12,000 feet up in the mountains. But the best part was that evening we were supposed to be flying back to Kabul. So we're in the hotel lobby getting ready to board the plane, and the pilot says, I can only take one person back because of the wind factor. So several of us got up and said, if you don't take us all, you don't go. We wound up staying there because of the wind problem for 3 or 4 days before he could get us all out of there. But we had a ball. We climbed the head of the Buddha. These are the 2 Buddhas that the Taliban destroyed a few years ago. So they were magnificent, and it's kind of a bittersweet thing for me because I have the memory of being one of the, I guess, few people who've ever been up there and will ever be up there since the Taliban destroyed them. So, but if Afghanistan were a place where the Peace Corps could be today, I'd sign up to go back in a heartbeat.
Fantastic, great, thank you.
My name is Dennis Ruff. I was in India, 1966 to 1968. I worked in a poultry project in Andhra Pradesh. I came home from my service, went to college, got married. My wife and I joined again, and we were in Afghanistan from 1971 to 1974.
I'm Sally Ruff. I was in Afghanistan, Mazar-e-Sharif, from 1971 to 73, and we extended for a 3rd year in Afghanistan, but we were stationed in Kabul. In both places, I taught English as a second language.
Great, thank you.
We got a little Adam here.
Yes. Our oldest child was born in Kabul in 1974.
Fantastic.
I'm Jane Willard. I served in Afghanistan from 1972 to 1974. And I lived in Lashkargah, but I taught in Changir at a construction camp. And my students were all adult male engineers. And the running joke between us was for 2 years they tried to find an Afghan male who was taller than I was. And they came within a 1/4 inch of my height, but they never found anyone that could beat my height. And I'm actually only 5'8½".
Okay. Hi, I'm Terry Keir. I was in Afghanistan from 1972 to 1974. I taught English in Mazar-e-Sharif for 2 years and then worked on building a school in the Panjshir Valley. The last summer I was in Afghanistan, I worked on a school partnership program where we built a school in the Panjshir Valley. There had only been students that actually gone to school under trees sitting on rocks, and we built an actual school there. So the village was quite excited about the possibility of a school. We used rock from the mountainside, gravel and sand from the river, and created a school. It was a unique experience and one of the best things I've ever done in my life, I would say.
Great. Okay.
My name is Jean Elwell Kier. When I was in Peace Corps, it was just Jean Elwell. And I was in Afghanistan 1972 to 1974, working in tuberculosis control. So the first year I was in Mazar-e-Sharif, and the second year I was in Kabul. Well, I always think about the way we used to vaccinate kids with the same needle over and over and over and run it through a flame, and then when it got really dull from poking so many people, we'd sharpen it up with some sandpaper and keep using it. We didn't have very many.
I'm Nancy Bnson. I served in Afghanistan between 1972 and 74, and I lived in a city in northern Afghanistan, Mazar-e-Sharif. I taught at a teacher's college, which meant that some of my students lived in dormitories. They were young men who came from the villages, and we ate lunch every day in the dining room of their building. One day I remarked that the food was, well, the food was the same most all of the time, but I thought that the mutton was very good that day. And the teachers around me started giving each other looks. And finally, my counterpart, Mr. Nassim, said, "Miss Nancy, that's not mutton that you are eating. It is camel." And camel is going to be served at the Minnesota State Fair this year for the first time.
I'm John Grossberger, and my wife and I served in Afghanistan from 1973 to 1975.
These Afghan teachers over, and as I mentioned, it's just my birthday, and Abdurrahman offered them chocolate cake. And so they had never seen this before. And so they said to Abdurrahman, "Is this what the Americans call booze?" And so he started laughing, and he explained to me after they left, that they thought that the chocolate cake was booze, and that they were going to have some booze. So after that, every time Abdurrahman made chocolate cake for us, he said, "John, I'm going to make for you and Peggy tonight some booze." So that was always our inside joke, and then, but it was funny because what Afghans thought about Americans and what they thought we liked to eat, and different things like booze and chocolate cake, but it was fun to have something like Abdurrahman, because when the Afghan friends would come in, they'd ask him questions, about us, and Abdurrahman would have fun, explaining, what his role is, and that at night we like to read books, and just things like that. But Abdurrahman was a great cultural informant for us. And I remember one time he invited us up the valley to his house, and he had 2 kids. And again, I didn't meet his wife, but I saw his kids who were quite young, 5 and 4, I think. And he really enjoyed, having us as his guest at his house. And it was about a 2-hour bicycle ride up the valley. And it was just a beautiful day, and it's all along the river and along this green valley, and it was just a really pleasant day. Long day. It was a long bike ride after 2 hours on bumpy, unpaved roads, but it was fun to see him in his own environment, and he really enjoyed that. And after we left, when we were leaving Afghanistan, we gave him all of our cooking utensils, all of our dishes, and our Coleman lantern, our Coleman stove, and all kinds of stuff. And he was just thrilled. And so we never had contact with him after we left Afghanistan. But my wife and I often talk about him, and what a wonderful man he was.